Flax here. I play things with strings, I hit stuff, and I sing. And today I'm excited to show you a very cool synthesizer. No, it's not this brand new baby behind me, which I am very excited about also, but I haven't even plugged in yet. No, today I have something that I'm going to be using for a recording session, and it's a really, really cool old analog synthesizer effects pedal. It is the Electro-Harmonix Micro Synthesizer. Now, this was first released in, I think, 1979, and it has a bunch of different sliders on it. There were a few different versions of it. The micro synthesizer creates different timbres by modifying the input signal into different circuits. It is inspired by the sounds of the 1970s analog synths like Moog, ARP, Oberheim, and others. The first microsynth was released in 1979. It had no on-off switch on the back side, and the foot switch was on the left side. In contrast to later versions, it had no LED, and the square wave was labeled as distortion. Well, when we jump ahead here, what we're probably looking at is the version 2. Version 2 was the first version with an on-off switch on the backside and an LED. Foot switch was moved to the right. So, if we take a look here, on-off switch and bypass foot switch on the right. Signal chain today, going from my Glasser electric violin into the micro synth, into the rest of my pedal board rig. If you want to see what that is, watch other videos. Here's the sound of the violin with no effects on. And I've got a room mic just over my head and this vocal mic. So you hear the sound of the instrument as well as the room sound. Never know if this is in tune. Okay, let's turn on the pedal. Wild sounds right away. I'm going to mute the microphones so you can really hear what's going on. Crazy, right? Okay, so what is happening here? Let's talk about the switches. I'm going to leave my vocal mic on for now, just so I can keep talking and do this live. I'm trying to do less editing, so there's a shorter videos and easier to make lots of them. Now, there's a bunch of sliders on here. We have, all the way to the far left, we have a trigger control. And that triggers when it recognizes a new note. Remember, this is designed for guitar, so if we set this sensitivity very low, I'll have to really strum my violin hard to get it to make some sound. But if I play softly, it might not recognize that as a new note. So this matters when you're using a pick. You can set the sensitivity so it'll only trigger the filter and the other stuff at a certain amount of firmness, for lack of a better word. Okay. So what else is next? There's multiple controls here, and this is the voice mix section. So if I turn all of these down, I'm going to turn the sensitivity all the way back up. Actually, let's go ahead and change all of this. Okay, so now, guitar. Slightly out of tune. Okay. With this setting, it's not really doing anything, right? If I bypass it, turn it back on, maybe the preamp in it is doing a little something, but it's pretty negligible. So it's the other three voices that are of interest. If we look at the octave, that's going to bring in an octave up. So now as I play, it'll bring in... It's pretty faint. If I turn down my vocal mic so you can really hear it, I'm going to play with the bow so you really, really hear it. Muting the audio mic. Pretty cool. Okay, what about the rest? If we look at the rest of it, we have now a sub-octave. I'm going to bring that in as well. I'm going to turn down the octave up just so we can really hear the sub-octave. Pretty cool. Okay, what about the last control on here? We have a square wave. And remember, in version 1, this was called distortion. Similarly, this is just an extra distorted-y kind of sound. When we think about distortion in clipping terms, it's when you have the waveform that is pushed so loud or so distorted that it clips, it chops the top of the wave off and gives it that sort of square top. So it makes sense that this would be kind of a distortionish sound. Let's keep the guitar in the mix and have a listen to the distortion now. Sweet. Okay, so that's pretty awesome. But what if we start to mix all of them together? Let's pull all the faders up. So now we've got the dry signal of the instrument plus the sub-octave, the upper octave, and the square wave distortion sound. Filthy. I love it. Okay, so that's the left-hand side. We've set the trigger sensitivity to be pretty high. And I could mess with that a little bit more and see whether a bow change would trigger it. But if I leave it mostly all the way up, I find that works best for me. Okay, let's leave these in and let's look at the next section, which is the filter sweep. So you'll see there are 4 controls here on the filter sweep. The first control is the resonance, and that has to do with what's happening at the cutoff point of the filter. Now, if you've messed around with synthesizers before, you know that filters is where it's at. This little puppy up here is all about the filter sweep. I love turning up the resonance of that filter and changing the cutoff point. So what cutoff point are we talking about? This is a low pass filter, which means that whatever the filter is set at, whatever frequency it's set at, it's going to remove any frequencies above that cutoff point. So in this case, rather than having a set cutoff point, it has 2 controls. There's a filter start frequency, and then there's a filter end frequency, which means that every time it receives a trigger from, say, a plucked note, it will jump to the start, and then it will glide to the stop frequency. So right now I have them set all the way open at the top, so it's not doing anything. And the resonance is all the way down. So let's change those a little bit. I'm going to lower the stop frequency all the way down, and let's see what we hear. Okay, now that's all the way down. Let's have a listen. I'm with the bow. Really chops the sound off. If only we could control the rate at which, we can. Let's make that go much slower. Now let's hear it. Remember, every time it hears a new trigger, it'll reset to that start frequency. So I'll use the bow and get a long sustained note. Now we're starting to sound like a synthesizer. That's pretty cool. What if we reversed it? What if we had the start frequency low and the stop filter frequency very high? It would sort of gradually bloom open. Let's have a listen to that. I love it! Woo! Now that's pretty cool on its own. There's one last control we haven't talked about, which is the resonance. So this time I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to crank that resonance up. And that means that whatever is happening at the edge of that cutoff point, you'll hear more of a spiky kind of thing, right? So if I crank the resonance up, we should hear the frequency where the cutoff is at, which is changing. It's sweeping through that at whatever rate we set. We should hear that sweep in a more pronounced way. Let's try. I love it. Okay, so that's a brief demo of the micro synth and what it can do. There's a lot of different sounds you can get. If you want it to be sort of laser beam stabs, we could lower the rate, keep that resonance up, and flip the start frequency high and the end frequency low, so it sort of does a meow, meow, like a extreme meow. Let's try that. So that's been a brief look at a vintage Electro-Harmonix Micro Synthesizer. Now, EHX still sells the micro synth. They have a modern version of it. It's sort of a reissue. It sounds slightly different than the old one, but it's still very good, and you can find it easily on Rebay. You can find it on Reverb or eBay, and sometimes you can even score a vintage piece like this. I found this on Craigslist when I was in Chicago last, so highly recommend you check one out if you get your hands on one. If you'd like to see more videos like this, leave a comment below and let me know. Also, you can like this video and you can subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more videos. And thanks to my patrons on Patreon for their continued support. I'll be posting some more extended sound clips and demos of this, as well as showing how I'm using it for an upcoming recording session. So if you want to see that and more, jump over to patreon.com/RobFlax. Thanks for your support. All right, have a good rest of your day.